Ave Maria, welcome back to No Apologies. I'm Brother Joseph, and today we're going to look at two more points concerning Galileo and the Church. The events surrounding Galileo are often pointed to as proof that the Catholic Church has a hatred of science, and that at the root of that hatred is a fear of enlightening man, because she desires to keep them in their ignorance, lest they rebel from her authority. But we point out that a look at history proves that kind of a claim to be both a ridiculous one and one that is completely unfounded. First, in concerning the events surrounding Galileo, it was a Roman Catholic who founded the system which Galileo advocated, Nicholas Copernicus, and he tells us in his own writing that out of fear of ridicule from his contemporaries, that he only gave his manuscripts over for publication at the relentless request of two other Catholics, a Cardinal Schomberg and a Bishop Gaius. And it's also a matter of fact that Nicholas chose to dedicate that work to the then reigning Vicar of Christ, Pope Paul III. So if the hatred of science existed, or a desire to suppress truth in order to control, it's ridiculous for her own members then to have founded and to have put forth the new system on their own initiative. And in all of that process, we find absolutely no opposition or any kind of persecution put forth by any member of the Catholic Church. The history also shows that even when Galileo took up Copernicus's work and had made his discoveries with the telescope, the Church still at that point rang no bells of alarm. And in fact, Galileo came to Rome in 1611, and having been received, he set up his telescope in the garden of another Catholic, Cardinal Bandini, to whom he began to show his discoveries. The Church only began ringing the bells when Galileo began to insist that the Copernican doctrine was to be taken as absolute truth, when we pointed out in our previous vlogs that not all the objections had been answered. So in light of that point, the Church here proves herself to be not a hater of science, but as the defender of true science, insisting that all points be taken into consideration, and that sufficient proof be provided for each, lest error be hastily adopted. So this position was nothing more than the common position of the majority of that day, for the Copernican system was still considered as unscientific, and even with the discovery of the telescope was still founded on many hypotheses that were not able to be proved. But putting Galileo aside, history also shows the Church to be not only favorable and supportive of scientific and technological advancement, but in many cases to be the forerunners. Louis Pasteur was a devout Catholic layman who established his germ theory in the development of vaccines. Alessandro Volta was a Catholic who discovered the first real practical method of generating electricity. Marconi with the radio was also a Catholic faithful, and of course Gregory Mendel, the father of genetics, was an Augustinian priest. So to point to the one incident of Galileo and to make that kind of a claim is first of all to misunderstand that incident, but it's also to ignore other situations in which there was absolutely no difficulty whatsoever. Now another cry which is often attached to Galileo is that these events prove that the Catholic Church is not infallible, as she claims. Now two popes were involved with Galileo, Paul V and Urban VIII, and it's true that both popes were not in favor of the new system. Like the majority of the day, they were convinced of its error. The question is, did either of them condemn the doctrine, as Catholics say, ex cathedra, meaning in a solemn, formal way, making it clear that they are now exercising that charism, and that their pronouncement now must be held by all the faithful under penalty of sin? And the answer, of course, is no. The decree of 1616, which placed Copernicus's work on the list of the forbidden books, was issued by the Congregation of the Index, not by the Pope. And even though the Pope undoubtedly approved that decision, as the Catholic Encyclopedia says, that approval doesn't alter the character of the pronouncement, nor convert it into a decree of ex cathedra. And the proof of that is in the fact that the congregation was clear that if the 9 sentences which taught the system as absolute were corrected, then the work was able to be removed from the index. So had this decree been considered as infallible, that kind of a pronouncement would never have been made. To remove it from the index for any kind of further consideration would have been considered a sin against the faith, because it had just been declared as something infallibly wrong. And as we've seen, the Church never once said that the system could not be held, but she simply insisted that it could not be held as absolute truth. So in conclusion, we say that there is no just or solid footing for accusing the Church of possessing a hatred of science, nor of asserting that the Galileo events prove the falsity of the Church's infallible charism. So thanks for joining me here on No Apologies. Ave Maria.